All right. So tell me where you are, sir, with everything. I guess start at the beginning. When did you take class? When did you finish? How did you feel about class? Did you test? And what have you done in between of all that? So kind of give me a background of where you are, and then we'll figure out how I can try to help you.
Well, tested in the fall of 2020
And is
and
that for your licensing exam or a class exam?
class, actually, I'm sorry.
For a class exam in fall of 2020. And did you pass
Yes.
that exam?
Yes, I was
And
able to successfully pass that exam
mhm,
for the class.
yes.
However, unfortunately, I had some substantial family issues literally the day I was taking my exit. Uh,
Okay. Sorry about that.
yeah, thank you.
So
Indeed, it did.
I'm guessing that means you didn't go try to take the test or anything in that time.
No, and that was a problem because I forgot a lot of stuff. I think I tested that maybe summer of 2021, maybe,
Mhm.
or fall, maybe. And then again in the spring of 2022. And here we are, winter 2024, and I haven't tested since.
All right. So at this point, you have, I'm assuming, a certain amount of time that you have to pass. Otherwise, you would
Absolutely.
have to take the class again, correct?
Yes.
What is that date?
April 16, 2024.
So you got 4/16/24, which let's take a look. How many weeks is that? Basically 11 Sundays from now. So let's say 10 weeks. It's just nice and easy. It's a nice round number. So you got 10 weeks to, I guess the goal is to test again and pass.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Uh, so,
And actually, I have
mhm,
to interject. So
mhm.
I have to compress that to 8 weeks because 2 weeks I'm going to be out of the country.
Okay. 8 weeks, you're going to be out of the country. All right. Let me ask this question on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being if you took it tomorrow, and one being like your first day of pre-licensing where you know absolutely nothing. How much knowledge would you say you still have? Like, does the vocab even feel familiar? Like, so I would say
Yes.
five is I could, with a little bit of work, I think I could pass it. And a one is like, dude, I got nothing.
I'd say a good solid 6 to 7.
Okay.
I have CompuCram, which has been pretty helpful with me just staying engaged.
Okay.
And I consistently average above half, well, above 50%,
Okay. No, that's okay.
but but not passing scores. So low 70s, high 60s.
And have you only used CompuCram to study this entire time?
Recently, no. Just CompuCurrent recently. I had Learn
Okay.
Test Passed and several YouTube videos, and that's it.
All right. And just so I have an idea, how much time do you think you can put into studying between now and taking those 2 weeks out? Like, do you think you'll be able to put in and do a big push between now and then? Because that's what it's going to take if you're going to pass.
Yes, to be 100% honest, I feel as if I have to because of the amount of time and money I've invested in this.
Okay.
So that's that. um, I've taken the test a few times. I think four maybe.
Hmm.
So I've paid for the class twice anyway, and I
Hmm.
just not really interested in taking the I mean the class again.
So that was going to be my next question. If by chance, let's say you take it, it is not what I want for you, but let's say you took this exam and you scored, I think you need like, let's say you need a 75 and you got a 73. Would you take the class again so that you would be willing to pass it? Or at this point, you're just like, nah, man, we're just it's not written in the stars.
I'm gonna be honest. That's a real hard one.
Okay. And you don't have to
That's a
answer
real
that
hard
question
one.
right now. I mean, you might get to the test. You might say no now, and then you miss it by one. You're like, no, this is principles, principalities.
Right,
We gotta
right,
we gotta move forward. Or you might be like, you know what? It's okay. I learned a lot. I learned about real estate and it's time to move on. Not, there's no one right answer. It's just something to think about.
right.
Right? So, with all this information, I do think that I have an idea of something that you can do or a system for studying that I think is going to be helpful for you in general. And I will show that to you because it's a system that I have a number of students using and it works, but it does
Oh
take
wow.
time, right? And I call it the 3-2-T system. And the reason I call it 3-2-T, and you'll see a page here, is because what we got to do is figure out what you know. We got to figure out what you're going to study. And that's what the three is, three topics. You study it for 2 days and then you test. So the 3-2-T system is really something I came up with after doing this over and over and over again because you by far are not the only person in your scenario. People are like, dude, I need to pass this test, but I also don't know where to begin to study to make sure that I can pass. Right? So the first thing I would do, because even though this plan is called 3-2-T, it's got really three sections. We got to talk about when you're going to study. We've got to talk about what you're going to study. And we've got to talk about how you're going to study because all of those are three very different things. Now, I kind of started you off with the when. The when are you going to study? Now, before I can even talk about that particular thing, I got to talk about your materials because you could study, but you might need to order a textbook or, get something to study from. So I know you have CompuCram, right? I know you got CompuCram. Do you have your old textbook or old
Yes.
questions or anything like that?
I've got everything.
Okay, so
Which
that's
is kind of
good.
frustrating because I never used it.
That no, I mean in this case it's going to be good. So you have a textbook and you got some practice questions from class and you've got CompuCram. And do you have the outline or the most recent syllabus for your state?
I do not right now, but I'm sure I could just go grab it from the webpage.
Well, yes. And so what I'm going to say is I know you're in North Carolina and as of March 1st in North Carolina, you're getting 20 more questions. So in North Carolina, you took 80 national, and then you took 40 state specific. But as of March 1st, this number is going to 60. So, yeah, I know it is what it is. So, you're going to need to update that syllabus. In theory, it hasn't really changed. You just have more questions. But if it's been a number of years, though, between when you took the class and what it is now, you just want to get that most up to date syllabus so that you have it. Now, I will show you how you would do that. And I'm going to, because I'm in your North Carolina, you could go to the North Carolina you know what? Actually, I will say this for anybody who's in North Carolina, the best way for you to do this would be to go actually to NCREC,
Okay.
North Carolina Real Estate.gov. And when you get here, when you get under education, you're going to see this pre-licensing course syllabus. Now, notice that says March of 2023. That should be changing. I think it's the second week in February to reflect the new upcoming test. But until that date, even this will be better than the old version you had from almost 4 years ago.
All right.
And then you can download it. And we love this syllabus because it talks to you about how many test questions. Of course, that's going to change a little bit, but what are all the chapters? What do you have to know? Like all of these things. This is going to be really helpful because the new one will have more questions, like have more questions in some of the sections, but the knowledge itself won't have changed. But it could have changed from 4 years ago. So we're good on that.
Yep.
So you'll know how to get that. I do want you to download it but I want you to download it for how you're going to start, but also put a note in your calendar, like on the 14th of February, you need to re-download and
Okay.
make sure it no longer says March of 2023, but says February of 2024. Right. So when it comes to like, do you have the materials? Yes. If you have your textbook, then you have a list of vocab, which will also be important as we go through, but I'm good with that. And because you're not in class right now, we don't need a list of your questions as of yet. So, success, if I know you have stuff to study, I need to know, what are you willing to commit to? I know you said you're going to make time, but how much time are you willing to connect or commit to every day? Like, are you studying every day, every 2 days? You're studying Monday, Wednesday, Friday. What days?
So currently, and for the next probably month or so, Tuesdays and Saturdays would be the toughest days.
Okay.
So,
But could you give an hour Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday?
absolutely. Wednesday and Thursdays, I can do like hours, like several.
So you could
Um,
maybe do 1 hour Monday for a shorter period of time and maybe 2 or 3 hours on Wednesday, Thursday,
yes, absolutely.
and then maybe Friday and Sunday just a little bit, but Tuesday and these are hours.
I will absolutely commit to that. Now, quick
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
What do you think about me possibly doing a practice test
Oh,
just to kind of gauge where
we're
we
gonna get
are
there. I already got you, boo. I already got you.
okay. Well, I was thinking about trying to get an attempt in before the first, before
Okay, well,
March 1st.
I got you. I promise you I got you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right. That's okay. I got you. Now, you've committed to this with me. But who's going to hold you accountable in your life? And I say that because as much as you want this, there's got to be somebody who's going to have to remind you. I know you want to go do X and Y with your kids or your wife, but you got to go study. How are you going to hold yourself accountable?
I've got a buddy, uncle slash mentor slash big homie, so to say, who I will share this with, and he will indeed hold me accountable because he was mad at me about Friday, but Friday was out of my hands.
Okay, so it's just going to be making sure that you don't disappoint him will be the motivation there.
That too, but I need to commit for myself. But it's hard to hold yourself accountable, right?
Yeah, I know.
In that regard, at least.
I think I just spelled disappoint wrong, but we're going to go with that. I don't think there's two S's. But as long as there's somebody holding you accountable, because like you just said, it's you. And I know you can want it, but sometimes you need that extra push to be like,
Mhm.
no, I'm going to really do it. So for right now, from what you've talked about, I don't actually think for you that your big issue is I'm not willing to put in the time. Like there's sometimes people say, I can put in an hour a week. That doesn't sound like you. So as long as you've got somebody holding you accountable and you're willing to do it, the win isn't your major problem. But I would ask that when we finish this session, go ahead and put into your calendar the days and times that you're going to study. Put it in that calendar because you and I both know if you don't make a plan for it, especially having kids, it just may not happen.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about now that you know when you're going to study, we'll talk about this 3-2-T. And it stands for 3 topics, 2 days a week, and then you test. And you're going to do this to gain mastery. Because I know that you've probably heard me say or somebody else say, you don't know what you know until somebody tells you that you don't know it.
Mhm.
But and also, there is a lot of information in this class. You know that. You know it is so much. So we got to organize. Sometimes just organizing our studies and making sure we have a checklist of I've done this, I've done this, I've done this is going to help. But we also need a system to make sure that whatever you're doing actually is increasing your score. We got to make sure that as you work through these next 8 weeks, you are getting better and better and better because you could spend the next 8 weeks studying. But if you're not seeing an increase in how much you're getting right, you're wasting your time. Our goal in using the system is that every week or so, you're going to see progression, so that by the time you get to your actual exam, you feel confident that you know what you know.
Right.
Make sense? So let's talk about this. You had just mentioned, and it's my day one. The first thing I want you to do is take a new simulation exam. I don't care if it's today, later on. I don't care if it's tomorrow, tomorrow's Monday, but I need you to find 100 plus questions that you have never seen before. It cannot
Okay.
be CompuCram. It cannot
Okay.
be a practice exam in the back of your book. It's got to be a brand new set of questions that you've never seen before. So
Okay.
let's stop right there. Where are you going to get that from?
Um, I was thinking there are options on the state site. I could I guess buy one of those.
Yeah,
There's
and go ahead.
I was also thinking Learn Test Pass. Also, I hadn't had that service in probably a year and a half to 2 years.
And
So
I love
those
Learn
are
Test Pass for North Carolina. And as you
okay.
can see on the screen, I got some options here for you. You can do paid. Paid is good. And you'll notice some of them are like CompuCram or Prep Agent, where it's like a computer system. Or you could buy a book of questions off of Amazon. You could do a used bookstore. I'm a big fan of used real estate exam books. Or you can do it the free way. You can go to your library and just like sit there and find a real estate book and take one of those exams. You could go to a place called scribe.com, which you'll have to put in for a free trial. But I mean, if you forget to take it out, it's $14. But I love scribe.com, and I can show you later if you want. But you go in and you just put in real estate exam practice. And all of these books, like you would see at the library, you can read on your screen. You can't necessarily download them, but you're basically paying for like a library service, if that makes sense. It's just more up to date books. So I love that. You can go to the Prep Agent Facebook page. You can just Google free practice exam. But the key here, no matter whether you decide to go free or paid, is you've got to choose questions you've never seen before, because at the end of the day, you're trying to take a test full of questions that you've never seen before. So if you want to know how you would do on that test, it needs to be a bunch of questions that you've never seen before.
Yep.
And since I know you're not an idiot, it doesn't do you any good to take questions that you've already seen before. Because even if you don't think you remember them, a lot of times you remember, like when you see the exact same question and the exact same answer choices, you're kind of answering out of, oh, I remember, and not because you actually cold know it. Make sense? So let's say you take this practice exam, which I know you said you want to, get a free practice, a practice exam in there. We're starting with that. Take that exam, take it seriously. Like, if this was my test, how would I literally do right now? And what I want you to do is break down that test. And that might mean you're going to have to spend some of that time of your next study period, or that same study period. Okay, where do these sections go? So, just as an example, I think you would have figured this out, but I want to show you how I would do it. So, I've got this practice question right here. Like, this has got 200. See, here, it's got like 200 questions here. So, you might take something like this. And what you might do is, whether you got the question right or wrong, you see how this word says agency agreement?
Hmm.
This is about agency contracts. So I would tell you to start making a list, like a checklist. And let's say you got this one right. So you're going to make, and we could talk about, how you would do it, but you're going to take something like this. And maybe you look at this and you go, oh, real estate contracts and agency. I got that one right. But then you do another contracts or agency question and you get it wrong. But then the next one you get wrong. But the next one, you get the next two right. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you're breaking it down into sections. And then maybe you take a test question and it has to do with CERCLA, which is an environmental thing, and you got it wrong. So then it's going to be here. But then you got one right. But then you got, two more wrong. Whatever it's going to be. Now, when you break down these questions, this could be now, this is a list I have that you can get from me. If you're like, Candace, I'm not going to be able to break it down, I would say break it down like into your chapters that you're
Mhm.
reading might be good, or you can get this from me. And if you're not sure of where the word goes, because sometimes you might get a word like hypothecation. Maybe you remember what hypothecation is, maybe you don't. But if you have a list of vocab, you can control F it. You know what I mean when I say control F? Like the find search
Yep.
function in a PDF. And you
Hmm.
can control F it and you can be like, oh, okay. And then you would find out that hypothecation is a thing on finance. So you could go back to that checklist and then under the so many things open here. Jesus.
That's
You
what I
could
use
go
in my
back under
book.
here and do it under finance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's typically what I do when I get hung up on whatever word or statement. I'll type it into my digital. I have the digital book also
That's
on the
perfect.
bookshelf.
Because what I want you to do is know what chapter it belongs in. Because at the end of doing that, what you're going to be able to do is get percentages. So maybe in this legal descriptions, and that says property, I just saw that property use, maybe you got a 60% here. And in appraisal and value, you got like a 45%. And real estate practice, you got a 72%. And in financing, you got a 31%. Get what I'm saying? So you want to break it
Mhm.
down? Because once you break that down, and again, this is just made pretty for when I'm doing this with you, you're going to say, oh, in finance, an agency, an appraisal, all of those sections that you're breaking it down in maybe estates and deeds and land use controls and maybe I don't know, property management. And you'll have that score. Maybe this was a 31 and this was a 48, but this was a 62, but this was a 79, and this can be a 54. This can be a 71, and this could be a 82. I want you to decide after you take this first exam, find your three worst topics. So in this case, it would be finance, it would be agency, and then it's going to be deeds. This is so important. And how I'm going to tell you to study these things now is going to be a little bit different than how, or what I want you to do with this information is probably a little different than you've done before. But I'll explain why. Right. You need to know these three topics. That's where the three and the 3-2-T comes from. You got three topics you need to work on. So if this is day one, the next two sessions that you're going to work on, that you're going to be studying, I want you to do nothing but finance. That's it. Finance. You are studying finance. Oh, there's a question or something comes up about estates. I don't care. Put it on a list for another day or maybe do a second 20-minute study time. But the majority of your study time is you digging down deep into finance. I mean, you should be all up finances, but I don't know if that, and we'll talk about how you can study and we can change some of that if what you're thinking is doing is not working. But your sole purpose for the next 2 days, where the two comes from, is finance. Whether it's reading, whether it's watching videos, whether it's making mind maps, whether it's doing Cornell notes. I don't know. We'll talk about the how later. But every time you study, I need to know that you're actually learning something. So each of those days that you study, you should have at least 10 new things that you learned.
Okay.
I woke up this morning not knowing these 10 things. After I studied today finance, I learned these 10 things. Now, it could be a lot more than 10, but it had better be at least 10 because I know there is no way that now it might feel like rejogging your memory, but I know that you have at least 20 things to learn between now and the next time you getting what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because I want your studying to be effective. You're a parent, you're a husband. I know you have a full-time job, so you don't have time to play. So if what you're doing with this study period didn't get you some more knowledge, you wasted your time. Make sense?
Yep.
So it's important that you write these things down too, because when it comes to reviewing, like right before the exam, or let's say you only have 15 minutes, if and depending if you do this digital or in writing, even if you only have 15 minutes, it's a good idea to revisit things you've learned. And I know it's a good idea to revisit things that you've learned, but I want to show you why, like physically, scientifically, why this is true. And to do that, I need something that I don't see. Dig deeper, 3 2 T, simple find it. I do a lot of stuff. Here, this. Are you familiar with the curve of forgetting?
Nope. But it looks really familiar, as in, I can speak to it myself, tell you that.
Well, it basically says when you learn something, you know 100% of it. Now, this is backed up by science. This guy did it in the early 1900s, H. Ebbinghaus, some German guy, I think. And then scientific studies ever since have proven the same thing. So when you first learn something, you know 100% of it. Within 20 minutes, you only retained about 58% of what you learned. So when you study that second day, you're going to study and you're going to learn those 10 things. 20 minutes later, you're probably only going to remember 6 of them. You wait an hour, you're probably only going to remember like 4 or 5 of them. You wait 9 hours, you got about three, maybe four. A day later, you got a solid three. 6 days later, you've remembering two. Like,
I
do you
see.
get what I'm saying? Like, this is scientific. However, what happens is, yes, you might study tomorrow for an hour, but right after you said, like, after that day, and I know it says 20 minutes, like, but within the end of the night, go back to those 10 things and review it. Because look what happens after your first review. That line changes, that curve changes. And then a day later, go back and review. Do you get what I'm saying there and why I'm saying it?
Yep.
So you're writing down those 10 things because the next time you study, you're not just going to study finance, but you're going to just even read over those list of 10 things you wrote the day before you roll into your next section. Because if you don't, you're more likely to forget it. It's great that you knew it on the day you studied, but you also need to know it a couple days later. Or I relate it to this. What's your favorite rap song or just song in general? What can you sing to without thinking? You just like the words come out.
A lot of Tupac.
Okay. So did you memorize Tupac's lyrics the first time you listened to it?
Absolutely not. Although I felt like I did.
And it's like, I mean, because what happens is the first time you're just like, I got the rhythm. And then the second time you might get the words that rhyme. Hey, bay, today. And then the third and fourth time, maybe you get a line or two, 3 or 4 more words in a line. And then eventually you get to where you can do like 3 or 4 lines in a row. But you had to listen to that dangable song at least 10 or 12 times before you were even flowing like you don't, it's not embarrassing. Why we think as students we're going to look at something once, like you may learn those 10 things in that one study session, but it's like, and that's Tupac. That's something you loved. You playing spades, smoking a black. I don't know. You're doing all that. Hopefully not. You're a dad and a husband now, but you can still play spades.
I actually don't know how to play spades.
Okay, just shut up. So Uno, you can play Uno.
There we go.
There, have you played the new Show 'em No Mercy Uno yet?
Not officially. My son has no mercy. He makes up stuff as he goes, so I'm sure it's a variation of sorts.
It is the new actual from Uno, No Mercy. There's a draw 6, a draw 10. It will break up families. It's a lot of fun. But
Yeah,
as you're
100%.
playing, you're listening to that Tupac, you're hearing it again and again. That's what I want you to do when I say, oh, okay, write down these 10 things that you know, because I don't want you to just know it that one day. I want you to have something to go back to. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
All right, so let me find where I am here. Do. You would think I'd take some of these things away, but I use them every day. Everybody needs something different. All right, so here. So you got these 10 things that you're obviously going to review again. We want to keep it top of mind. And when you finish studying for that day, you got kids. I know your brain ain't working well. So just mark down, what did you study? How did you study? How long did you study? And I'll jump ahead to say, let's say you spend this first week or this first like 7 session that we're going to go through. If all you did was read, and when you take a practice exam again, you only went up by 2 points, I need you to have marked how you studied so that if it wasn't effective, you got to find a new way to study. So if you're
All right.
like, oh, Candace, I spent those 2 days just reading and rereading and rereading. If when you go forward and you're not seeing progression, reading ain't it. That's not it.
Right.
We got to move on to the next,
And
but
it's
we got to
not going to
keep
be.
track of it. You said it's what?
It's not going to be.
So you already know reading's not it. We'll pick and we'll talk about the different ways you can study. But what did you study? How many hours did you study the first day? Maybe it was 2 hours the first day and 3 hours, after that. Because you're going to do this, remember, for 2 days. Day one, we took a practice exam. Day 2 and 3, we studied finance. Great. Well, that was our first topic. Our second topic we needed help with is agency. So guess what? Day 4 and 5 is going to be
Yeah.
agency. And every day you study, you should have 10 things. Now, before, like on day two and sorry, this is day 4 and 5. You may study an hour, but you need to put at least 10 or 15 minutes to that hour reviewing the stuff from finance. Do you get what
Okay.
I'm saying? Because we don't want to lose it. Because there's songs that you like, but if you only hear it once, you're going to forget what's in it. The majority of your time is agency, 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 whether it's the first 10 minutes or the last 10 to 15 minutes. Go back and read about those 20 things you had from before. And I think you're seeing what's going on here. If day one was 1 or 2 and 3 was finance, day 4 and 5 is agency, guess what deeds is going to be? Day 6 and 7. And it's the same thing. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. That makes sense? So we'll say
Absolutely.
deeds. Now, at this point, you're going to have 60 things that you have learned, 60 things that you have learned from, from when you just started. And when I say this, and it's going to sound mean, I don't think you're going to do this, but only write down new things that you've learned. Like, you're not cheating me. If you can only say, well, Candace, I really did, I spent a lot of time trying to break down how dual agency works, then that's okay. But you have a better handle on dual agency, then maybe you only got 7 that day. But I'm not just trying to have you write down 10 definitions. I mean, I want you to be like, you know what? If I had seen this question on the test, I probably would have gotten it wrong. But because I studied it this week and now I know it, this is one of my 10 for today. Make sense?
Yep.
And when you do day 6 and 7, obviously you're going to spend again reviewing agency and finance and those 40 things to kind of get that repetition in there. So we've gone from day one, a practice exam, to 2 days of finance, 2 days of agency, and 2 days of deeds. And now we get to the T, which is day 8. You're going to take a new, never before seen practice exam. And that's why I gave you that list of sources. Because I don't want you taking the same exam. You will have memorized some of those questions. We're going to take a brand new exam and break it down because now when you score on finance, and agency and deeds, those scores should have gone up. Maybe this time in finance, in a perfect world, you got like an 83. And in agency, you got a, I don't know, a 79. I mean, these scores went off the That's what we want, right?
Absolutely.
But in deeds, you only got to a 61%. You would stop and look. You're like, I just spent 2 days of my life studying deeds. It only went up that much. Do I need to change how I'm studying? Is it just
Yes.
that deeds is such a complicated that you just need more time with it? But the other reason I want you to take a full practice exam is because you still have things like appraisal and property management and estates. And maybe appraisal is 52% and property management is 73% and estates are a 61%. So now deeds goes back over here along with appraisal, along with estates. And I think you know where this is going, correct?
Rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat. And the reason why this is so important, where you're doing basically a new practice exam once a week or so, is because one of the things that I know students do is when they're studying is even it's been a while, but let's say you had taken that last licensing exam like 6 months ago. You look at the score and you go, I did so terrible in finance. And you kill it in finance. You study finance until your ears bleed and you pass finance, but then you ignored estates. Then you ignored property management. And then people take that exam and they fail it. And they're like, ah, and it's this round robin circle. By taking a practice exam, even though you're going to spend the next week studying these things, guess what? About 7 days from then, you're going to take another practice exam and you need to make sure that these three scores are staying where they need to be. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
So
And you
that's
would
this.
just add that
Go ahead.
those 15 to 20 minutes before each new topic to
Yeah.
review those as well.
And you'll get to understand. I mean, it depends on how you want to study and the methods, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you always want to be reviewing. So even though this week you should be doing deeds, appraisal, and estates, aside from the hour that you already set aside, whether it's first thing in the morning or in the evening, go back and read last week's 60 just to remind yourself, because eventually you're going to have a notebook of, oh yeah, oh yeah, I remember that. Like just something you can, it's not real quote unquote studying. It's just reminder studying. Just, oh yeah, I don't want to forget that. Just kind of, I listened to the song once while I went to go grab some milk. Get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because what we want to see is these scores going up, up, up. If they're not going up, it's telling us we're doing something wrong. And especially in somebody in your position, you got one and done. Not that I want to make you nervous, but you don't have until April 16th to decide whether or not you're ready. You need to know if how you're studying is effective now. We need to know a week later, am I doing things that is helping me get better at these test questions? Also, I know every student struggles with how they ask questions because it's tricky. And by taking tests by different sources, so maybe you do a practice exam from PSI, and then you found some random book in a used bookstore, and then you went on Prep Agent's Facebook book group and you found some random test somebody uploaded, and then you have some from your teacher. I'm sure you had a wonderful teacher, but I'm sure you had, classroom
Indeed, I
tests.
did.
Yeah, so so it's one of those things where you want to make sure that you're getting used to reading these questions, because at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter how the question is written or who wrote it. You should, if you know it, you know it. For example, you know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, correct?
Yep.
So if I told Stephen King to tell me a story based off of Little Red Riding Hood, it would be, I'm sure, a great and scary story. But maybe it was F. Scott, Fitzgerald, Scott F. Fitzgerald, whichever. I don't know. Can't think of his name right now, but you know who I'm talking about. He would write it, from the 20s. It would sound same base story of Little Riding Hood, but it would feel completely different. If you had a romance novel writing the author writing it, you would still recognize Little Red Riding Hood, even though the terminology or how the story I was laid out, you know it so well. You're like, that ain't nothing but the story of Little Red Riding Hood. I want you to feel that confident in your vocab and you're understanding the topics. Even if they're using different examples or the questions are worded a little bit differently, you're like, oh, you can't trick me. I know it. I see what that is, even if the words are different. Because if you were to Google eminent domain right now, you would get 40 different definitions of eminent domain, all worded somewhat slightly different, but all explaining eminent domain. And you need to be comfortable that when you know eminent domain, it doesn't matter which way of the 40 ways it's explained on that webpage. You're like, oh, yeah, that's just a different way of saying eminent domain. So that was a lot on talking about what to study, but will that help you like keep you on track to make sure that you cover all of the topics?
As long as I am truthful about it to myself, yes.
Now, here's the good news. Now, for you, I don't think it matters as much because you got a date. But sometimes students are like, well, how do I know when I'm ready? When you are taking these practice exams, and you are scoring passing scores in every single one at least 3 or 4 times, or you take a practice exam, I passed it with, high 70s, 80s. I take another practice exam, I passed it, high 70s and 80s. I take another practice exam, I pass it, high 70s and 80s. Then you know it. These are 3 different exams from 3 different places. And even then, you've taken like 12 practice exams leading up to it. Like you should be ready at that point. Right? Because sometimes you might take a practice exam this week and score 83 in something, and you take one a week later and you're back at a 40. Okay, something's wrong, not right. Something, it wasn't sinking in. We got to change it. But if you scored, started with a 60 and then you're getting a 62 and then you're seeing a 64, but then maybe it jumps down to a 62, but then it goes up to a 75. Like you want to see that incremental so that you know where your trouble spots are and that you're not forgetting anything, but you're building and you seeing an increase, right?
Yep.
So he's covered 2 things: when you're going to study, what you're going to study. And I know that says wow, but that's because I haven't changed this from when I first did it. That's going to say how.
Gotcha.
How are you going to study? So you already know that you are going to have topics, right? You you're going to know that you have to study this thing right here, this thing right here, this thing right here. How have you been studying in the past? Like if I said, hey, go study right now, sir, for 2 hours, what does studying look like to you? Like
Currently,
tip.
it has been whatever category I scored the least in, just going back through it and possibly reviewing that chapter. But honestly, not likely. Maybe a YouTube video or something
Maybe a YouTube
to,
video or something.
yeah,
Okay.
just
Well,
because I can have my hands free and operate freely about my day with it in my ear. Then
so
hope I retain something for the next uh, attempt.
okay. I want to talk to you about something in the studying world called active versus passive learning. And I'm going to use an example. So let's say you and I go on a work function or in Kansas, and you lose your mind and you let me drive from the hotel to we're offsite or whatever. We're there for a week. So Monday, we don't know where we're going. I'm driving. I have the GPS on the car and I get us there. You're in the passenger seat. Tuesday, I drive us there and back Monday. I drive us there and back Tuesday. I drive us there and back Wednesday. Now, by Wednesday, I'm probably not needing my GPS at that point.
Right.
Thursday, I have a little bit too much fun Wednesday night, and I'm like, dude, you do it. You're like, bet. So you've been the passenger there and back for 3 days. Now, Thursday morning, you are going to drive us there. when I say that you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure I can do this without the GPS, like you're familiar with the route, but you might be questioning yourself like, wait, did I turn at the McDonald's or did I turn at the Burger King? And was it a right or was it a friggin' left? Like, I think we passed a Starbucks on our right, but maybe we didn't. Like, you're familiar with the route, but you don't know the route. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Even though we've been in the car doing the same route for the same amount of days, I was actively driving the route and you were the passenger. So you were passively taking in the route. The same thing applies to your studies. I love a good video. I make tons of videos. You know that. I love a good video. However, you ever notice when your teacher, or if I'm explaining something to you, you're watching a video, you're like, oh, that totally makes sense. Of course it makes sense. That's what I'm paid to make it do. But that is different than you actually being able to reiterate it or explain it to somebody else. So when you listen to a video or a recording, you're like, oh, yeah, I knew that. Candace just said that. I knew that. Did you know it? Are you just familiar with it? So passive learning is when you are just listening to a video. Active learning is when you are literally engaging your brain. Like if you have a good session of active learning, it should be like when you're looking for an address in your car and you turn down the volume because your brain is like, mm. And then when you find it, your brain's like, okay, that hurt. I'm too old for this. You know that sensation I'm talking about?
100%.
That's what your active learning should feel like. So when you're doing, hey, I'm just studying deeds or I'm just studying finance, your brain should probably be a little tired. Now, passive, I know you've got down. You can watch videos, but I want to give you some suggestions of different ways uh, to study in a more active manner. And the first would be flashcards. But when I say flashcards, I don't want you to use flashcards in the same old way. I want you to use a system that is going to actually help you retain and learn. Right? And I call that flashcards plus. And I'm just going to kind of show you what I mean. So give me a vocab word, any vocab word you can think of in real estate.
Joint Tennessee.
Joint Tennessee. I love it.
Not I.
That's okay. You're going to grow to love it. So the first step, when I say make a flashcard, like your flashcard will have on the front the word joint tenancy, but on the back, I need you to make it yours. Think of it like you're, decorating your own Christmas tree. Your Christmas tree looks nothing like my Christmas tree. And even if we had the exact same ornaments, our Christmas trees would look different, correct?
Yep.
So the first step to joint tenancy is going to be categorize. If you had to pick a chapter or a topic that joint tenancy is in, where would you put it? Like, where would you say it goes?
Ownership. Uh,
I
can't
love it.
remember the rest of it.
Yeah,
Ownership and
yeah, it's ownership.
okay.
Great. Step two, which is one of the most important steps, is define it. But what I do not want you to do is go Google it or come up with the legalese answer that you would have found if you opened up your textbook. Like, and you may not know, and that's okay, I'll tell you, but could you define joint tenancy for me?
I guess the ownership between one or more people, I guess before or after marriage or something like that.
Okay. So that whole marriage thing is you're thinking of tenancy by the entireties.
See, I just Tennessee. I asked on YouTube the other night. Tennessee, there's too many of them.
All right, that's okay. That's okay. So let me remind you this way. Would you? Now, the answer should be yes, because your wife might hear this video. Would you complete that between you and your wife? She is your entire world. She completes you. Together, you're an entire thing, like you, your spouse, your wife. She's your entirety.
Yes, indeed.
So now when you think of tenancy by the entirety, you know it has something to do with relationships.
There we go.
Whereas joint tenancy, I want you to think of, and I'm just going to assume that you had the childhood that all of us had. You would go smoke a joint with your boys.
I had asthma, so I didn't actually.
You know what I mean, sir. That's what he says on camera, folks. That's what he says on camera. Good answer. Good answer.
Maybe a
You did not
brewski.
inhale. But you know the
Uh,
scenario I'm thinking about. That's what your friends and whatnot, right? Okay,
right.
cool. It is when you have one or more, I should actually say two or more people, because you can't just have one. If it's two or more, if you got more than one, it's two. So two or more people. But this is the thing that comes with the right of survivorship, where if you have more than one owner, if one of the owners dies, the interest doesn't go to their heirs, it goes to the remaining people,
Okay.
right? So let me give you an example. Pretend like you don't have asthma, and four of you and your friends go in on a bag of weed. It's just the four of you there, and you're the only four that go into it. So let's
Okay.
say there's you. So we'll just say, no, you know what? It's A, B, C, and D. These four people went on a bag of weed. D is like, you know what? I got to go. Are we going to allow him? And we've rolled all of it up. All of it is already rolled, and we've smoked through most of it. We just got one joint left. Are you going to let him cut off his fourth of a joint and take it with him? Or do the rest of us just get to smoke what he left behind?
That's
That's
what was left.
we're going to smoke what's left. He doesn't get to take it and give it to his heirs. That is joint tenancy. It's this idea if you die, your interest doesn't go to your heirs, it gets absorbed or smoked by the surviving people, the people who are still in the room. So now A, B, and C are enjoying whatever's left on this bag. That is the right of survivorship. The idea that when you die, the surviving owners take over, they absorb your ownership. So now it's A, B, and C. If C dies or leaves, C doesn't pass anything off to anybody else. We're A and B is just going to be like, it's ours now. You understanding the right of survivorship?
Yep.
Here's the only
Whatever's
difference.
whoever's left,
Whoever's left gets it. Let's say
non-heir.
A, B, C, and D go to buy the bag. But on the way back to the house, D gets called home by his mother. But he's like, dude, my brother, you know what? My brother's going to pay me back for my quarter, and then he's going to go and he's going to smoke with y'all. Do you get what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So D's brother. Here's the catch to joint tenancy. D could sell to his brother, and his
Okay.
brother can come in and he can smoke a quarter of the weed. But he wasn't there for the initial buy. So he could, since he paid for his quarter and he wasn't there and he wasn't in for all the arrangements and what type and who we're going to get it from, if he wants to, D could sell to his brother. Brother could just say, hey, why don't we weigh out a quarter and I'm to take it and go. Does that make sense? This
Hmm.
brother doesn't get treated the same as, nah, man, you left. We're keeping it. Once he sells to his brother can now do what he wants with his. He could give it to the sister. The brother could take his quarter and he could share it with his besties. Like, do you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I have one question. So,
Yeah.
does the right of survivorship drop after the
Yes.
origin?
Yes. Well,
Okay,
it drops for the person who sold. So if
right.
D sells it to his brother, the brother is not a joint tenant. He's a tenant in common. So he can now go will it or air it to whoever he wants. But A, B, and C keep the right of survivorship because they were there from the beginning.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that does.
So the original four have a pact. This is ours. We're not going to let anybody in. But if the brother wasn't part of the original pack, he doesn't get to, and he doesn't get to benefit if something happens to A. If something
Oh,
happened
okay.
to A, then B and C are going to absorb it. Brother wasn't part of the pack, So he doesn't get to soak in the rest of it. He bought his money. That's all he gets is his interest. That's it. He doesn't get to
So,
benefit from smoking if A dies.
okay. So D sells to his brother. He's got a quarter. He's technically a common. If A,
Yep.
B, and C happens to die in a car accident on the way back, it's just poof gone. Or
Well, so why you got to kill everybody off? So if you have
sorry,
A,
sorry.
B, C, and D, if D sells to his brother, you're absolutely right. He becomes a tenant in common. But if there's a car accident and A and B dies, A's interest and B's interest goes to C. So C and the brother are tenants in common. Because
Okay,
the brother was not in on the original, he doesn't get any of the survivorship.
gotcha.
Make sense? Now, if all of them died instantly, we're going to call an attorney, which is going to be problematic because in some states smoking is not legal. So, all depends where we're going with this. But does that make sense when I say you got to define it and I want it to make sense to you? Like I use the example of, smoking with a joint. Sometimes I talk about people in a boat. Sometimes I talk about like food. I don't know. But you have to be able to explain it. Like how old is your oldest child?
8.
8. I could explain this to your oldest child, your eldest, without using weed. Like I could use donuts, like donut holes or something. This idea that, hey, if you pay for it at the beginning, you get to always make sure this is just yours. Nobody else has to come in unless somebody sells. Like I could explain this to your 8-year old in a way, maybe not as complicated, but in a way that he would understand. Oh, well, the right of survivorship means if one of the original owners dies, I get their portion. I get to absorb it. Kind of like food, because you have multiple kids. If your 8-year old, because you have an 8-year old son, correct?
Yep,
If there was an older son who was 12 and your 8-year old did not finish his food, we would just assume the 12-year-old brother is eating it. Like it's not going outside of the house, it's getting absorbed by the rest of the family members. Like, kind of
gotcha.
getting what I'm saying there?
Yep.
Cool. So we've done two things in these flashcards. One, you categorize it. That is important because maybe you can't remember what exactly it is, but if it was a word like hypothecation and it has to go with finance, but you don't remember exactly what it is, it's not the answer to an appraisal question. It's not
Exactly.
the answer to a contracts question. Just being able to put it into a category might help you eliminate it as an answer choice. Obviously, defining it is defining it. But step 3 is relating it. Relating this to something that you like, what else goes with it? So I could say, hey, we talked about joint tenancy, but there's also tenancy by the entirety. And there's also tenancy in common. Those are all forms of co ownership. And if I talk about joint tenancy, we know in order for it to be legal, possession, interest, title, and time all have to be there. And it comes with the right of survivorship. Like, I want you to relate it to other things that you know.
Or specific
Connect it.
to specific to other topics or just
Connect
experience
it
to
to
help.
anything. I would say
Okay.
to put it towards anything in real estate. So mind map it basically, because we know that these are all forms of co-ownership, but then we also have like 20 people plus ownership, which could be condos or townhomes or, co-ops. And you want to see what is its puzzle piece? Where does it fit into the puzzle of real estate?
Gotcha.
Because there's not a single word in real estate that doesn't somehow relate to other things in real estate. That makes sense what I'm saying there?
Yes.
Cool. And then step 4 would be why is this important? Slash, how could this cost you the loss of money in real life? Why is this important? So for this one, I would say this is important because If somebody wants to go sell a house and they have joint tenancy, we might need to get some other signatures. Or if you're
Hmm.
dealing with an estate and it turns out that they had joint tenancy, then all of a sudden, this is not a property you can sell. Kind of getting what I'm saying there?
Yep. Very,
It's a
very
lot.
much so.
But step 3 and 4 are really important. And I used to give this example, even though we kind of know the truth now. I'm assuming you don't follow NASCAR.
A little bit.
Darn you. I'm assuming you don't follow ice skating.
Nah, nah, not
Cool.
at all.
So let's say there was another Nancy Kerrigan. I got hit in the knees 10 years ago.
Right.
And I told you this person that got hit in the knees, they survived, but the person who hit them was Becky Smith. You don't care about Becky Smith. But if I told you Becky Smith was actually the person who shot Tupac because she was an ex girl who got jealous, would you ever forget the name Becky Smith?
Absolutely not.
Because it's important to you. And that's why I want you to, in steps 3 and 4, relate it to what you already know and figure out, why is the real estate commission making me learn it? Because if I just tell you to do something and there's no reason behind it, what do you care? It's going to go in one ear and out the other. But if you can
100%.
relate it to something that you do care about in real estate, or why you might not get paid in real estate, all of a sudden it has some level of importance. And the more important it is, or the more interesting you find it, the more likely you are to hold on to it. So when I say use flashcards as a learning tool, it's above and beyond just reading or just watching videos. Because can you see how, if you have to do this for every single word and trying to explain it and connect it and say why it's important, now you are really engaging with the material and not just, here's the question, here's the word, here's the definition. The
Yeah.
more you can connect it, the better off you're going to be with trying to remember it.
Yeah, and that's a good method for me specifically because I can recall things that actually I feel like matter, which is typically something relatable.
Hmm, related. It's why, when I teach, or you've heard me teach, it's why I give so many crazy examples. And if you can't come up with something, just Google joint tenancy Florida man. I'm sure something will come up. Look at, people in Florida always do that. But I'm sure you can come up with
Years.
some crazy story, or, something that happened in Florida, or any other state that might make it interesting, that might help you remember it. That
Yeah.
makes sense? Like, okay, here's a great example. I am currently binge watching this show on Paramount Plus, that is called Fire Country. And it takes place in, I think, north western California, maybe mountains. I don't know. Anyway, it's where fires catch on fire, or forests catch on fire, whatever.
Gotcha.
And so in this episode, they're in the backwoods and somebody's at a retreat. And in this retreat, they're burning coal so people can walk over them, but they've been burning them for days. And it turned out they started something called a root fire. So when you looked at the surface of the earth, it looked normal. But what was happening is the roots and the dirt and the leaves over centuries, that, dirt isn't just dirt, it's debris and whatnot. That
Hmm.
was on fire. It was like a basement fire. And one of the firefighters was like, how is it burning? How doesn't it need oxygen? And the person in charge was like, well, yeah, the earth is not just solid. Air, there's air pockets. Enough air can filter through the ground to give a slow burn to the earth underneath. And what that reminded me of was radon. People
Oh,
always wonder how radon, how can you have a buildup of radon if it's outside the house? I mean, you got cement walls and things like that. And I know I shouldn't, but it reminds me of a fart. It comes through your clothes. You fart, people smell it. It seeps through,
yeah,
right? And cement, it seeps through the cement too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
when they talked about this root fire and the oxygen being able to get through the dirt, I couldn't think of anything but radon. I was like, just like radon or farts,
Yeah,
But I'm
yep.
supposed to be not an 8-year-old, so we'll talk about radon. But But you see how
So,
what
but
I mean? Like when I say connect it to something that's important, or why, why is it important, or what can you remember? That's what I mean. Because now, are you ever going to forget that radon can seep through the walls and the dirt?
now, now because radon is well, I guess both of them are pretty toxic depending on
You know what you
radon and
ate?
farts one and the same.
So, I mean, now that's something you won't forget. It'll be, and if you do, it'll be easier. Like on your flashcards, you could be like farts and root fire. And then you'll be like, oh, yeah, that's the fact that it seeps through the dirt. That's what I mean by connecting it. Because in trying to connect it, your brain really holds on to it better.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by active learning. Do things that are making you do more than just read the answer, but it's really making you think about answering. What I did here, like connecting it, that's a version of mind mapping. And you can get deeper and more complicated with mind mapping and things like that. But overall, what I want is for you to look at, okay, how am I going to study? Am I going to do flashcards? Do I want to create lists? And or do I want to do questions? But here's what I'm going to say. I want you to promise me that you don't only do questions as your study method. Yes, you're going to take those practice exams. And yes, you have CompuCram, and maybe you'll get something else where you can break down those questions by section. But you got to promise me that you don't just do questions to learn. And here's why. You have a textbook and it's full of all this information. That's everything the commission wants you to know. And think of that like stars in the sky. But once you have those stars in the sky, we break them down into, let's say, constellations. So math is a constellation, estates is a constellation, finance is a constellation. And they tell you, know all of the stars in this constellation of finance. When you take a practice exam or practice question, just like with your actual licensing test, they can't they can't test you on every single bit of information. So what they do is they told you, hey, you need to know all the stars in Orion. But we can't ask you the name of every single star. So what we're going to do is randomly take a star from the belt and randomly take a star from his shoulder and maybe one from his foot and maybe one from his bow and arrow. Right? Cool. We're going to ask you these random questions, but because you don't know which star we're going to ask you about, you need to know all of them.
Yep.
Well, when you take a practice question or practice exam, once again, the practice exam can't teach you everything. It's not designed to. The practice exam is just like with the licensing exam saying, we're going to ask you 12 questions instead of 4, but it's 12 questions out of 200 things we could ask you. So what will happen is sometimes students will only take practice exams. They get to their real licensing exam and then they're like, I didn't learn that. This was stupid. I didn't learn anything from CompuCram. There were words I've never seen before. First off, CompuCram's not is not teaching. CompuCram was to see, hey, do you know these random things just like you're going to be asked random things on your licensing exam? CompuCram, Prep Agent, any kind of question service, they don't claim to be a textbook. They claim to be a bunch of questions that will help you know if I can't answer a lot of these questions, I'm missing out on some of those stars in that constellation. I need to go back
Yeah.
and study the constellation. At no point did anybody say taking practice exams is going to teach you all of the stars. And if all you do is take practice exams, of course you're going to miss some of the stars. And you're getting a star over here, a star over there, a star over here. Practice exams don't help you connect the questions or the stars in the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I actually found myself not necessarily memorizing, but relating certain questions and taking the exam back to back was there was a score, a jump in the score, but not because of the knowledge I retained, but because the repetition of certain types of questions that looked and read the same way.
And I mean, as much as I want you to pass this test, I also need you to not get sued when you get out in the real world.
Right.
So you can most definitely take practice questions, but if you are going to take practice questions, I need you to go beyond just, oh, this is the right answer or this is the wrong answer. I want you
Oh wow.
to, that's information too. That's not it. Here, this is what I need. So, look, you see, I did number 26. I know they're in the wrong order, but whatever. Which of the following statements is true considering concerning a general warranty deed? It must be signed by the grantee if he or she is a trust beneficiary. It ensures title. The grantor's warranty is limited to his or her own acts during only during the time the grantor was in possession of the title, if I can get my words out. Or it's the most protective deed a grantee, that should say a grantee could get. Do you happen to know the answer to that question?
No, not right offhand. I'd have to do some dissecting.
Okay. And that's okay. Because what most people would do is they get it wrong. And then they look and they see the answer is actually four. And they go, okay, a general warranty deed is the most protective deed a grantee can get. And then they go to the next question. And that is like leaving meat on the bones. Do you know what I mean when I say leaving meat on the bones? I know,
Yep.
I know, because I know you like me. You know, you got that friend or that family member, like my sister, who leaves all the meat on the ribs, wasting ribs,
We'll
wasting
fall
ribs.
out, leave some meat on the
Ooh,
bone.
ooh. And that's what happens if all you do is, oh, this is the right answer. There are so many more learning opportunities here. So when
Yep.
I look at number one, okay, you've told me one is not the right answer, but why? What is it that about number one that makes it wrong? Well, first of all, deeds don't have to be signed by the grantee, they have to be signed by the grantor.
Right.
And I mean, the trust beneficiary, yeah, if there's a trust, but not all deeds, not all general warranty deeds go to a trust beneficiary like this. We're just kind of throwing big words in now for no reason. Make sense?
Yep.
Number two, it ensures title. Is that true? Does a
Nope.
general warranty deed provide title insurance?
That was my first strikeout. That's
Yeah.
like logically, I would say, well, scratch out number two.
Okay. And what does provide title insurance?
um,
Title insurance.
yeah, it was like yeah, title.
Title insurance
Yeah.
provides title insurance. And then while you're doing this, if you're going to use the questions, don't just stop with, oh, yeah, it's title insurance that breaks down title insurance. Like to call it study vomiting. Talk
Right.
about everything else that you know about title insurance. So if I were to study vomit right now, I'd say, well, I know there's two policies. One is for the owner and one is for the bank because the bank has their value in the house and the owner has their equity. But as the owner's equity grows, how much title insurance they have grows. And for the bank, the lower that the loan is, the lesser their policy is until it's gone. We know title insurance means there has to be a title search, which is done by the attorney or the escrow agent. And then there'll be an attorney's opinion of title. And that's going to be you. Like, do you get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, use it to make sure you know a lot about title insurance. So this is not right because title insurance. And then number three, the grantor's warranty is limited to his or her own acts only during the time the grantor was in possession of the title. This is the definition of a special warranty deed. So, in going back to look at the other answers, you could review special warranty deeds because we know a general warranty deed. If you're giving me a general warranty deed, you're saying, hey, Candace, it doesn't matter if I got a lien on the property or the person before me put the lien on the property or the person before that person put the lien on the property. And a general warranty deed, you're giving me warranties or covenants that you're going to fix it and make it right.
Yep.
And a special warranty deed, you're saying, hey, Candace, I didn't mess it up. So if somebody comes along and says, I owe money, I'll cover that. But the person I bought it from, I don't know them. I don't know them. My name is Bennett. I ain't in it. I can't help you. Go talk to them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So you can use it as a good way to study and review because you and I both know with these questions, the devil is in the details. And like this one, the detail was a or versus an e. And the more you rehearse getting to know those details or spotting those little insignificant details, the more it becomes second nature. And the more likely when you get down to those two answers that sound kind of alike, the more you can say, this is why these two answers are different and which one of those differences is actually the right answer, the more likely you are to choose the right answer when you're down to those two.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha. And just working backwards, understanding that the most protective, the it's also eliminating number three because in my head, what number three is essentially saying is that there there's nothing left.
Yeah.
you know, his own acts. Well, if it's limited to the person's own acts and it's leaving, then there's nothing left, right?
Yeah. So I love it. You got to be able to break it down and know why you're choosing the answer. Like, do you ever take one of the exams? You're like, oh, I don't know if it's this one or that one. But if you can truly eliminate at least two, you got a
Right.
50% guess. And if with those last twos, you can be like, okay, here is the difference. And this is why I'm saying this one versus that one, then you've looked at the answer choices so well. I mean, it's going to give you that knowledge base. It's really looking at what it's saying. And that's something most students are not good at. I'm not even good at it. I rush through questions all the time. Sometimes slowing it down, because I know sometimes we rush and then you go back to check the question answer. You're like, oh, I just didn't read the question right, or I didn't read the answer right. So I practice this as much as I preach it. Like, okay, I'm down to two. Let me really think about what these two things are saying and then choose my answer versus, well, they just kind of sound alike. I'll just choose one. No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. So, oh, that's not what I meant to do. So, do you think, oh, and this is just talking about like the different types of questions you might see on the test, but is this going to help you? Like, does this give you a plan to know first what to study, your first exam, and then breaking down your topics so that you know when you're good on a topic and you're not, kind of put some categorization, some organization to your studies?
Yeah. And that's what I've needed. Like I said, I'll admit I've associated questions with certain vocab and certain words with certain questions and things of that nature. Just understanding what type of questions read what kind of way and what the typical answer is for that type of question based on repetition.
Yeah. And I don't want you to
And
do
that's
that
it.
because application and analysis.
Hmm.
Some of your test questions will be, what is this? But a lot of them are, you have to know it well enough to apply it and then to also analyze the situation, like with agency, application, and analysis. So that's going to be key. And if you want, take a look at, we don't have time to do it today, but anytime you get a new piece of information, not all of these questions will fit for every piece of information, but this is a good list that I'll sometimes have tell students while you're studying, put this to the side. And when you learn something new or you get a new vocab, answer these questions like, what does it mean? How is it connected to the big picture? Why is this important? When it says, where do I place it? I usually use this for mind mapping. Like, where would I place this in a mind map? Is it
Gotcha.
how something is created? Is it a function or an offshoot of something? Like, where would I categorize it? If I had to file it in a file folder, where would I place it?
Gotcha.
Right? Wow, that was a lot, but I'm really hoping that it helped. Yes?
Yeah, I just I will admit I have not let go of this March 1st 20 extra questions thing. Um, that's not exciting. That is not
Well,
exciting. I can't afford, well, right now, today, I don't feel as if I can afford 20 extra.
and it's just going to be, if we listen to what the commission has said, it's not new information. You're just going to have to know more of it in more detail, which is why I love doing the 3-2-T because you'll know. You will, if you're not seeing improvement, then you're not ready. So if you know you're going to see more questions on the licensing laws and rules and the state specific stuff, then you know, like maybe in those chapters and that, when you study licensing laws, you don't need to get 70s in that doing practice exams. You need to be getting 80s, 90s on those practice
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, I get it. It's there's a ton of realtors out there, and it's going to help filter out some of the growth, I guess, or stunt some of the
Yeah.
growth. Would have the proper folks out there practicing.
Yeah. I was like, that's what I'm hoping for, that people get out here that are more educated and just can serve the public better.
Right.
So this is good. You're glad you did this today?
Yeah, 100%. I've been wanting to. I just felt like I needed to get in the right headspace, and the flame of the date essentially did that. The
All
hard
right. Well,
stop was sufficient.
good. Well, I'm so glad that I could help you today. Check your chat because you'll see I put something in there. Do you see that?
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
So I'm so glad we can meet and we will talk later. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so very much. I
No
appreciate it.
problem. See you next time. Bye.